Okay, everybody, I'll go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome. This is the Webster Film Series event, April Fulcis, related to City of the Living Dead, as you can see from the screen, obviously. My name is Pete Timmerman. I'm the director of the Webster University Film Series. I want to do a brief introduction because right around now is when people tend to come in mass, and I don't want them to miss any of the actual presentation, but they can miss me ramble. That's perfectly acceptable. Um, so if you're not familiar with this, the Webster University Film Series is St. Louis's only year-round nonprofit cinema. We're in our 42nd year. We tend to show movies in the Winifred Moore Auditorium, which is in Webster Hall building on Webster University's main campus in St. Louis, Missouri. But the pandemic has made it to where we can't show movies in person right now, as you can imagine. We haven't shown anything in person since mid-March of last year, early March of last year, something like that. So it's been a little over a year now. But in the year when we've been dark in the theater, we've been doing a lot of virtual programming, which you obviously know because you're here right now. We've done both virtual speaker events like what you're attending, but we also have a virtual cinema where we show a lot of the movies that we would have shown in person under better circumstances. You can find out about these movies on social media. We're at WU Film Series on both Twitter and Instagram, and on Facebook we're at on Facebook we're at Webster Film Series. So WU Film Series, Twitter, Instagram, and Webster Film Series on Facebook. Right now, as we speak, we have two movies in the virtual cinema. They're both new films. One is a new documentary called Wojnarowicz. It's about David Wojnarowicz, the artist slash activist. The full title is Wojnarowicz, F word U, F word, F word. I feel like it's sort of to misunderstand David Wojnarowicz's art to censor that title, but I'm sure you also don't want to hear me say it. But the New Yorker just named Wojnarowicz one of the best films of the year. Richard Brody was very positive about it. I just love it too. I think it's a fantastic film. It's sponsored by QFest St. Louis, St. Louis's annual LGBTQ film festival, who just announced their lineup. They go live in a couple of weeks here. You can find QFest lineup at cinemastlouis.org. You can get to Wojnarowicz through our website. That's webster.edu/film series. You can also find it on our social media. That one actually sort of officially closes tonight, but the link will stay live if you want to watch it, so you don't actually have to rent it tonight. It'll be live for a few more weeks. We're just not going to promote it as heavily as we have been. And then also the other film in the virtual cinema right now is called This Is Not a Burial, It's a Resurrection. It's from Lesotho. It was the first time Lesotho ever submitted a film to the Academy for Oscar consideration. It didn't get nominated for any Oscars, but that's because the Oscars are terrible. It's no slight on the film itself. But everyone we've talked to that's rented This Is Not a Burial, It's a Resurrection has loved it. It's getting very, very good feedback. Just yesterday, actually, New York Magazine said that it's the first masterpiece of the year. That one's got 1 week left in our virtual cinema. And then starting tomorrow, we have two more movies opening. One is a French film called Slalom that just played at Rendezvous with French Cinema in New York a few weeks ago. It stars the usual Dardenne brothers star Jeremy Renier and rising French actress Noé Abita. It's very good. And then there's kind of an experimental, it's kind of hard to describe. It's a hybrid narrative documentary experimental film. And it is kind of equal parts all three things, called Mothni Towards the Ocean, Towards the Shore, which was a hit at True False last year, among other things. But look for those two coming tomorrow. Quickly, I wanted to thank, we have some sponsors for the April Fulcis events, and I wanted to thank them. The first is Messed Up Puzzles. You can get to them, messeduppuzzles.com. It's their storefront, and they're on social media just at Messed Up Puzzles. But they buy the the official art to the types of movies that we're celebrating here tonight, and they make puzzles out of them, as you can imagine. We have registration prizes, if you didn't already know, to where if you register and attend any of these April Fulcis events, which you obviously are, you're automatically entered to win. They're giving away two Fulci puzzles. The ones that they have in their current line are the New York Ripper, the Beyond, and Zombie. So if you were to win one, you can just pick whichever one of the three that you want. And our second sponsor is Left Bank Books out in the Central West End. Left Bank Books opened in 1969. The Webster Film Series started in 1979, and we've collaborated for almost as long. So far, I've found our earliest collaboration that I've found was 1985. So we've been collaborating with Left Bank Books off and on for about 36 years. But Kia Wilson, the presenter last week, worked there for a time, and they're offering her book at a discounted rate as long as the April Fulcis series is going on. They have a number of books by our featured speakers, including two by AC, our speaker tonight. If you go to their book club section, there's one for, if you go to their book club section, there is a mention of the April Fulcis event, and you can get to our books by our featured speakers there. And then also, if you attended Kia Wilson's event last week, one final plug, she's doing an event on Monday with Left Bank Books, not with us, with the filmmaker slash novelist Sandy Tan. That's Monday night of next week. You can get to that information on Left Bank's website, which is left-bank.com. So lastly, to bring us up to the film series itself, of course, this is week 2 of April Fulcis. There are 5 total weeks. Next week, we have Andy Treifenbach, who's the guy behind the Late Night Grindhouse series here in St. Louis and DestroyTheBrain.com. He's going to speak about The Beyond. 2 weeks from tonight, we have Aaron Aubuchon, who's the Associate Dean of the School of Communications at Webster University, talking about The House by the Cemetery. School of Communications, if it's unclear, is the department, or not the department, it's the school in Webster University that houses, among other things, the film series. So the film series is part of the School of Communications. Aaron taught a popular class on horror films a couple of years ago called Grave Tales. And that's kind of where a lot of the stuff started to come together. And then the last speaker of the month is Troy Howarth, who wrote a biography about Fulci, Splintered Visions, which you can find on Left Bank's page for April Fulcis. He's also recorded a ton of audio commentaries, over 75 audio commentaries, including on a bunch of Fulci films. So if you have the physical media releases of Zombie or The New York Ripper or House by the Cemetery or Don't Torture for a Duckling, he's the guy that recorded the commentaries on those discs. But he's the last Thursday of the month, which is what, the 29th, something like that. I might have that date messed up. Final Thursday, though. One last thought before I hand over the floor to our speaker tonight, AC, is that as AC is presenting, don't be shy about putting questions that you might have in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We go directly into a Q&A after he's done presenting, and it's nice to have questions handy. It kind of keeps the ball rolling. I do have some of my own questions prepared, but they're mostly stupid. I'm sure that your questions will be much better. So I'd like to have your much better questions rather than my stupid questions to go into. But that said, our speaker tonight, Dr. AC, he is the author of 2 best-selling guidebooks on horror films, which you'll find on Left Bank's website in the April Fulcis section. He used to write for Horror Hound magazine. He's the guy behind the website Horror 101 with Dr. AC. He's also is well known among all of the horror fans that I know, and I'm very happy to have him tonight. So I will stop talking and get out of the way so we can listen to Dr. AC.
Hello, everyone. I'm Aaron Christensen, known in certain circles as Dr. AC, and it's my honor to discuss one of Lucio Fulci's more notorious efforts, City of the Living Dead, or The Gates of Hell, as it was known for its 1983 American release and for decades on video shelves. I first encountered the film in high school as part of a marathon VHS viewing party, and the power of that initial viewing has not ebbed one iota over the years. At that time, I was still a novice horror fan, having grown up on the Universal classics, the gigantism craze of 1950s and 60s sci-fi, the stop-motion epics of Ray Harryhausen, and was just starting to dip my toe into the murkier waters of the slasher movement. Suffice to say that I had never seen anything like Gates of Hell at the time. What I find so impressive is that I can still say the same nearly 40 years later. It is that exotic dish, so foreign to our taste buds, that we're literally not sure what it is. We might not even be able to say if we like it or not. It reminds us of other meals that we've had, while at the same time infusing spices and combinations that are truly unique and powerful. Perhaps too powerful for some, especially when certain notes fall into the category of what we've been told is a bad movie with dubbed performances, clunky dialogue, and barely coherent narrative. But for those willing to engage with this unusual effort on its own terms, it can be, as it was for me, the gateway to an entirely new cinematic worldview. Let's look at the basic plot in big fat quotes. In the village of Dunwich, Father Thomas mopes around a graveyard looking suitably bummed out by his existence. He decides to shuffle himself off this mortal coil courtesy of a length of rope and a nearby tree branch, and manages the job quite handily. Unfortunately for the rest of us, his act of self-slaughter opens one of the fabled gates of hell. And if the darn thing doesn't get closed by All Saints' Day, humanity is doomed. In addition to that happy bit of news, the priest's death also sends Manhattan psychic medium Mary into a cataleptic stupor during a seance, with the poor gal ending up getting buried alive. After being saved by intrepid investigative journalist Peter Bell, she dusts herself off and entreats Peter to help her find the resting place of Father Thomas so that they can close the gate in time. Now, hearing the above synopsis, you might suspect that you at least have some idea of what you're in for. But as those of you who experienced the film itself now know, it doesn't even come close. This is Lucio Fulci in full flower. Emboldened by the recent worldwide success of Zombie, aka Zombie 2 in 1979, the erstwhile director and his co-screenwriter Dardano Sachetti set out to deliver an example of pure cinema, eschewing narrative logic, character development, or any semblance of conventional horror storytelling in favor of a nonstop parade of Lovecraft-inspired insanity, interspersed with lunch-buckling gore moments courtesy of Gino De Rossi and Franco Ruffini. Now, while many might argue that 1981's 1-2 punch of Fulci's The Beyond and The House by the Cemetery are arguably more accomplished efforts, developing and fleshing out the themes explored in their predecessor, I will always have a soft spot for Gates of Hell and defend it to the end. There's a reason I welcomed Dave Kasanke's passionate and articulate essay within the pages of my 2007 compendium, Hidden Horror, because I truly feel that this is a wildly underrated effort, one that introduced many genre fans of a certain vintage to the unabashed outrageousness that is Italian horror cinema. But wait, you might say, I've seen plenty of splatter flicks in my time. What makes this one so darn special? Without fear of hyperbole, City of the Living Dead was easily one of the more unconventional early 80s horror efforts. At a time when Tom Savini and his ilk were making outrageous effects their own raison d'etre, Fulci's film landed like a crimson pie in the face. Burgeoning gore hounds had never encountered such literally visceral visuals, where bleeding eyes traded beats with brains ripped out of the backs of heads. People threw up their own intestines. Maggot storms arrived on biblical levels. Victims were smothered with worm-packed mud pies. And village idiots named Bob had their craniums randomly ventilated via enormous table drills by the enraged patriarch next door. But why is all this happening? Your poor brain cries. How does one explain these bizarre events? The answer? Get out of here with your explanations. They were concerned only with creating emotionally disturbing cinematic moments, and Fulci and Sachetti dismissed such trivialities as cause and effect. Yes, these reanimated corpses can teleport, blipping willy-nilly on and off the screen and all around the set. No, they're not really flesh-eating zombies, but they're fine with taking a nibble from time to time. Yes, the specter of Father Thomas keeps zipping around town, but he doesn't really do anything other than engage in staring contests that leave the other side disemboweled or forcibly donating gray matter to the cause. While never really scary, Gates of Hell is also never boring, right up to its screen-shattering, mind-melting final frame. Now, due to time restrictions, I'm not going to spend a lot of time discussing the man himself or his career, primarily because I assume this will become well-trodden ground by the end of the month, and because we have the man who quite literally wrote the book on Fulci, Troy Howarth, with Splintered Visions, closing out the series to discuss Don't Torture a Duckling, which is one of my personal favorites. But also, we have so much fertile ground to examine just with the banquet before us. Now, I confess I was slightly dismayed when I saw this month's program lineup and that it couldn't be more diverse in illustrating Fulci's career. With all 4 films in his so-called Gore-tet being shown, it understandably leaves little room for his other features. But it's worth recognizing that all 4 were shot over the space of only a 2-year period of a directing career that spanned over 5 decades and dabbled in every genre, from comedies to westerns to war films to crime thrillers. It's a little like discussing Akira Kurosawa and only showing his early samurai films, because, well, you kind of got to talk about Rashomon and Yojimbo and Sanjuro and Seven Samurai and Hidden Fortress, but that also neglects such astonishing efforts as High and Low, The Bad Sleep Well, Akiru, and Dreams. And yes, I just included Lucio Fulci and Akira Kurosawa in the same breath, which might be a first. My point is that there's more to Fulci than his most famous horror features. But there's no denying that the reason he continues to be discussed and examined 25 years after his death in March 1996, is because of these breakout films that made him a star on the drive-in screens and video shelves the world over, as well as a pariah for the pearl-clutching contingent during the video era's nasty in early 80s Britain, which saw 3 of the 4 titles torn from shop windows and put on trial. Amazingly, City of the Living Dead was the only one not seized. Figure that one out. We can and will talk more about Fulci during the Q&A portion, but at this time, I'd like to throw the spotlight on a few of the other players that make The Gates of Hell the unique experience that it is. Screenwriter Dardano Sachetti has had his fingerprints on a multitude of projects throughout the 1980s, writing or co-writing many of Fulci's and Lamberto Bava's output, Bava's being Demons 1, 2, 3, and Blade in the Dark. Sachetti got his start earning the story credits for The Cat o' Nine Tails for Dario Argento and Bay of Blood and Shock for Mario Bava. He also served on the writing team for Ruggero Deodato's Cut and Run, which, by the way, has an insane cast ranging from Lisa Blount to Karen Black to Michael Berryman to Richard Lynch to Gabriele Tinti, aka Mr. Laura Gemser, to Eric LaSalle, to Ottaviano Dell'Acqua, aka the poster zombie from Zombie. Born in 1931 in Royal Oak, Michigan, Christopher George, who plays reporter Peter Bell, became an actor after a stint in the Marines after lying about his age to be inducted, working with directors as eclectic as Howard Hawks, William Castle, Andrew V. McLaughlin, William Girdler, Jack Smite, William Greffet, Menahem Golan, and James Glickenhaus. His resume also sports extensive TV credits from his own starring series, The Rat Patrol and The Immortal, to guest spots on Charlie's Angels, several voyages on the Love Boat, Vegas, Thriller, McCloud, SWAT, Wonder Woman, Mission Impossible, several trips to Fantasy Island, and Bewitched as George the Warlock in the episode of the same name. He posed nude for Playgirl in June 1974. His wife, Linda Day George, she of Bastard, Bastard, Bastard fame from Pieces, was a frequent co-star in his films and TV appearances. George died of a heart attack at the age of 52, brought on by cigar smoking, karma, and also an accident from a rolled over vehicle on the set of Rat Patrol, which apparently scarred his heart and injured his skull and spine. His genre credits include Whiskey Mountain, Gates of Hell, Grizzly, Day of the Animals, Pieces, Graduation Day, and his final film, 1983's Mortuary, opposite a young Bill Paxton. Now, he and Fulci did not get along on the set, with the director calling him the Grand Galant and the dog with the cigar. More on that in a second. Catriona Mccall, who plays Mary, started her performing career as a ballerina dancer in London, England, then segued into modeling following an injury, which then led to a brief stint in French television, which is where she caught the eye of Fulci, who asked her to be his leading lady for City of the Living Dead, and the two apparently got on so well that she stuck around to play the female lead in his next 2 features, The Beyond and House by the Cemetery. She was married to actor John Finch for 6 years, Finch being the star of Alfred Hitchcock's Frenzy, Roman Polanski's Macbeth, and Roy Ward Baker's The Vampire Lovers. A little bit of trivia, Finch turned down the role of James Bond in Live and Let Die, which left the door open for Roger Moore, and he was also originally cast to play John Hurt's chest-bursting role in Alien before dropping out due to illness. Carlo Dimejo scored his most recognizable genre role as Jerry in City of the Living Dead, and I just love his completely deadpan approach to the insanity all around him. He also appeared in a number of others, including Bruno Mattei's The Other Hell and Women's Prison Massacre, Fulci's House by the Cemetery and Manhattan Baby, Luigi Cozzi's Contamination, and Armando Crispino's The Dead Are Alive. Meanwhile, Swedish-born Janet Agren, who plays Sandra, deserves her Scream Queen title, perhaps even more than her famous co-star, having appeared in a score of genre flicks, including The Killer Reserved 9 Seats, Umberto Lenzi's Eaten Alive, Sergio Martino's Hands of Steel, and 1982's Panic, opposite the Beyond's David Warbeck. She also had supporting parts in Red Sonja and Billy Wilder's Avanti with Jack Lemmon. Giovanni Lombardo Radici, aka John Morgan, plays Bob. He's well known to Italian horror fans for usually being on the receiving end of some very nasty business. with one of the highlights being castrated and, well, half-capped by, by Umberto Lenzi for Cannibal Holocaust. And he also served as human punching bags for Antonio Margheriti's Cannibal Apocalypse, Ruggero Deodato's House on the Edge of the Park, Michele Soavi's Stage Fright in the Church, and turns up as the badly burned Father Spoleto in the 2006 remake of The Omen. Little fun fact, Bob was originally supposed to have a hunchback in the script, but Radici requested to do a limp instead, and Fulci consented. Michele Soavi and Daniela Doria played Tommy and Rose, the unfortunate couple making out in the car when Father Thomas shows up. Soavi, who was originally slated to play the part of Bob, was a protege of Dario Argento and served as assistant or second unit director on many of his mentor's films, including Tenebrae, Phenomena, and Opera, as well as appearing on screen in a multitude of genre flicks, including the Argento-produced Demons, New York Ripper for Fulci, and Blade in the Dark for Lamberto Bava, before launching a successful directing career of his own that included Stage Fright, The Sect, The Church, and the spectacular Della Morte dell'Amore, aka Cemetery Man. Highly recommended. Doria, on the other hand, has the distinction of showcasing three of Fulci's most memorable on-screen murders, regurgitating her own intestines for City of the Living Dead, getting a butcher knife through the back of her skull and out her mouth for House by the Cemetery, and having her nipples sliced in twain with a razor blade in the New York Ripper. Ouch. That is busy character actor Robert Sampson, with 150 TV and film credits to his name, as Sheriff Russell. Sampson would become much better known to horror fans a few years later as Dean Halsey for Stuart Gordon's Reanimator. Interestingly enough, Sampson is billed third on the US one-sheet poster behind Christopher George and Catriona Mccall. Massimo Antonello Geleng, either production designed or art directed for most of Italy's heavy hitters in the films, getting his start in the business with Sergio Martino's Mountain of the Cannibal God and Island of the Fishmen. In addition to many of the titles already listed, he became Dario Argento's go-to guy for latter-day efforts such as The Card Player, Sleepless, The Stendhal Syndrome, and Dracula 3D. This was the only time he worked with Fulci, however, who partnered with Massimo Lentini for most of the remainder of his 1980s efforts. Vincenzo Tomasi edited all four of the Quartet and most of Fulci's subsequent efforts, as well as The House on the Edge of the Park for Umberto Lenzi, Cannibal Holocaust for Ruggero Deodato, Killer Crocodile, directed by Zombie 2 producer Fabrizio De Angelis, and Killer Crocodile 2, directed by Gianetto De Rossi, the famous FX artist, not to be confused with Gino De Rossi, who did this film. Another regular in Fulci's stable was cinematographer Sergio Salvati, who shot many of the director's early efforts up to and including the Quartet, as well as a few beloved Empire offerings for Charles Band, such as David Schmoller's Puppet Master, Catacombs, and Crawl Space, starring Klaus Kinski, Cellar Dweller for John Carl Buechler, Ghoulies 2 for Albert Band, and Enzo G. Castellari's 1990 The Bronx Warriors. Fabio Frizzi provided the thumping musical score, as he did for Zombie and the Beyond, but not for House by the Cemetery, as well as scads of other notable films with Fulci and others, including Scorpion with Two Tails for Sergio Martino, Devilfish for Lamberto Bava, and Luigi Cozzi's The Eurotrash version of Godzilla, which, considering we've got, Godzilla versus Kong out there, probably worth checking out. Ah, yes, Gino De Rossi, the man with the plan behind the wicked effects on Zombie, Cannibal Ferox, Piranha 2: The Spawning, and Exterminators in the Year 3000. His work on Gates of Hell pretty much speaks for itself. He's also had a few rubs with respectability, having delivered the goods on such prestige picks as The Last Emperor and Casino Royale with Daniel Craig. That's the second 007 reference. Thank you very much. Rosario Prestipino was but a fledgling assistant makeup artist on Gates of Hell, with De Rossi and Franco Ruffini taking top honors. But the young latex slinger would soon rise to the top of his field, rendering memorable efforts for Burial Ground, Nights of Terror, Demons and Demons 2, Opera, both versions of The Black Cat, Fulci's and Luigi Cozzi's, and Ruggero Deodato's The Barbarians, starring the Barbarian brothers, Peter and David Paul, alongside Richard Lynch and Michael Berryman. Ah, yes. Now it's time to tally all the fatalities. My count is 21. We'll just go through those right now. Father Thomas, who was hanged. Mary, she's kind of dead for a while. Emily, who gets the worm mud pie. Rose with the intestine vomit. Tommy gets the back of the head grab. Jane Holden, who is the elderly woman in the coffin who later shows up in Janet's kitchen, she dies off screen. There's the Moriarty mortician who gets bit by Jane Holden on screen and then presumably killed off screen. Bob, who gets the drill through the head. Mr. and Mrs. Robbins, who are eaten by their daughter Emily off screen. Sandra, who gets the back of the head grab, also by Emily. The bartender, Mike, and the random bar guy, who are killed off screen by Tommy, Bob, and Emily. Peter, who gets the back of the head grab from a teleporting Sandra. Sandra again gets killed, stabbed by Jerry. Father Thomas gets killed again with that crucifix to the junk, and then he bursts into flames. And then we've got those 5 rando zombies that are on fire. So we've got 9 on-screen kills with Sandra and Father Thomas getting double tapped. We've got 7 off-screen. We've got 5 rando flaming zombies and 1 fake out. Ah, yes. My friend and author Doug Lamoureux likes to say, movies are made of moments. And in the case of City of the Living Dead, when we have the intestine vomit, a drill through the head, and a storm of maggots, it's pretty hard to, they tend to be so powerful that they overshadow the myriad weirdness that pervades throughout. But here are a few others that are worthy of note that you might have forgotten already. The billowing flames in Teresa's apartment. What's up with that? The self-inflating sex doll, which apparently could also double as a life raft. The fact that there's 0 therapist and client confidentiality in Dunwich, because Emily just rolls right in the middle of Janet's therapy session. I love that the plan for Mary and Peter to search for Dunwich is just to get in the car and start driving. I also love the fact that if Dunwich was built on the remains of what was formerly Salem, Massachusetts, that's 243 miles away. Also, if it was built on the remains of Salem, Massachusetts, what is the current Salem, Massachusetts doing? Did they move it? I also love the fact that they just kind of drive around and find, oh wait, no, they don't. They stop and ask for directions. That's right. They stop at a church, they ask a priest, and he says, go back toward the highway. There's a road headed left, blocked by a landslide. That'll take you to Dunwich. Okay, rewind. Go back toward the highway where there's a road headed left, blocked by a landslide. The road to Dunwich is blocked by a landslide. Thanks, Father. I love Fulci's fixation with the name Bob, and you'll see what I mean in a couple of weeks. I love the rhino head over the sea painting. What's up with that? Of course, I love the vomiting up the guts, but then the question is, who grabs Tommy's head? Is that Rose? Is that Father Thomas doing some kind of Mr. Fantastic arm stretcho thing? Who grabs Tommy's head? I want to know. I love the storm of maggots, but even more now when I watch this movie, what I love is after the storm of maggots, Jerry calmly walking over to the phone, wiping off all the maggots off the receiver and answering the phone from John John. That's what I love. Also this, the soul that pines for eternity shall outspan death. You dweller of the twilight void, come Dunwich. Okay. And then there's that ending. So Fulci himself has actually provided different accounts on why the ending is the way it is. Sometimes he says that they shot an ending, but then the film elements were destroyed. Sometimes he said they didn't have time to shoot an ending, so they just did the best they could. He and editor Tomasi did the best they could. Sometimes he says that this was always the plan. Sometimes he says it was his idea. Sometimes he says it was the editor Tomasi's idea. I think we can all agree, well, also, what does it mean? What does it mean? Does it mean John Joe's become a zombie? Does it mean the gates of hell didn't get closed in time? One theory posed by Nathaniel Thompson was that that it's Mary's brain shattering. I think there's no real agreement on what it does mean. I think we can all agree, though, that it's not a great ending, but it's kind of wonderful in its not greatness. A few fun facts. The film was shot in Savannah, Georgia, started filming there in April 1980, and then was completed in Rome. Other Italian productions that were also shot in Georgia are Cannibal Apocalypse, The Visitor, and The Beyond. Everyone except for Catriona Mccall and Christopher George were dubbed by other actors. Those are the only two that actually got to use their own voice. Fulci cameos briefly as the medical examiner. And speaking of cameos, that's Perry Perkanen, aka the blonde guy from Cannibal Ferox and Cannibal Holocaust, as the gravedigger alongside porn star Michael Gaunt. Zombies, Tisa Farrow was originally slated to play Mary, and Cannibal Holocaust, Robert Kerman was slated to play Mr. Ross, the guy who drills Bob. This is fun. All Saints Day is November 1st. So a lot of the action in the film actually takes place on Halloween. You remember earlier I said that Christopher George and Lucio Fulci did not get along. Apparently, as payback for the maggot scene, Christopher George took a handful of maggots and put them into Fulci's pipe tobacco, and Fulci was not particularly attentive when he was filling his pipe, and so he did not find out until it was too late. Here are a couple of lingering questions that I like to ponder. So Mary shreds her fingernails bloody, clawing at the coffin lid, but then is immediately fine afterwards. Also, why wasn't Mary embalmed? Is she Jewish? Are those really Emily and John's parents? Because they look kind of old. Maybe that's grandma and grandpa. Also, I'd like to ask, what is Emily's relationship to Jerry? Because Emily just rolls into Janet's therapy session. She kisses Jerry. She says they won't be able to go out tonight because she's going to go meet with Bob. And then when she's missing, Emily's parents call Jerry and ask if he knows where she is. So maybe they're having a relationship. But of course, then when the corpse starts showing up at Janet's house, she calls in a panic, and his response is, "I'll be there in 10 minutes, honey." So he either got over Emily really quick or something was going on. Also, I don't know that I necessarily want my therapist calling me honey. Yes. So you can feel free to use any or all of these during your next office Zoom meeting or outdoor barbecue. At this precise moment in some other distant town, horrendously awful things are happening, things that would shatter your imagination. Ever since Father Thomas hanged himself, Dunwich ain't been the same. It's kind of scary. Ain't you ever seen a body unearthed before? Good Lord, that kid's gonna fry. Mark my words. There's a lollipop in the glove box. You're the one who got me out here in the armpit of the world chasing your galloping cadavers. 5 people have gone missing in the last 48 hours. I say it's Bob. You're nurturing a pet neuroses, that's all. Like about 70% of the female population in this country. A good stiff drink is the only medicine. And I don't believe those idiots who claim our ancestors were Salem witch burners. That's about it for me. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this stroll to hell and back as much as I have, and that I've proved a worthy guide. Many thanks to Webster University for including me in the mix, and I'm looking forward to the rest of April Fulci.
Well, thank you, Dr. AC. I will once again encourage our attendees to please put your questions in the Q&A box. If you put them in the chat, I'll probably see them there too. So just put them wherever you want. I'll figure it out. Actually, another option, if you don't want to type and would rather speak, we can turn on your microphone. The best way, if you want to go that route, if you raise your hand, we'll ask permission to turn on your microphone and take it from there. Anyway, I'll start the Q&A. The first question I'll ask, one came early on and I wanted to hold it until now because I think it's a fair question. Our audience member, John, said that it's a non-serious question, but I feel like it is actually fairly serious under the circumstances. He wants to know if they bought night crawlers in bulk for this movie.
I don't know the story behind whether they bought night crawlers in bulk. I know that they bought 50 kilograms of maggots, of live maggots for the maggot scene, and then they were dropped into basically just kind of an airplane fan in order to project them through the windows. And as you can see, like for some of that's, it's some styrofoam or something, but when they zoom in, those are actual maggots being blown at them that are then ending up littering all over the floor.
That's lovely. So we have an anonymous attendee who I guess is shy. Maybe they don't want to out themselves as a horror fan. But they say they have two broad questions. One is, do you think it's accurate to say that Fulci's best years were 79 through 83, or is it just because that's the stuff that us ugly Americans know him for best? I'll let you answer that one before I get into the next one.
I think that's a great question. I think I do not, well, okay, so the best is that's a subjective thing anyway. I recently discovered a couple of Fulci's early films from 1969, One on Top of the Other and Beatrice Cenci. And both of them just immediately shot up in my estimation. And I think that's the thing. Like, I think Fulci, it's really worth exploring his entire filmography because he's going to have different flavors throughout. He was actually a fan of Agatha Christie and just kind of standard thriller narratives. And so these movies were actually a real change of pace for him. They were, so he was taking a kind of an experimental approach himself. And so yes, I do think that, this is what we know him for, and this is why he keeps coming up. But I think it's hopefully something that piques our interest enough to start looking forward and backwards from these movies. This may well be one of his high water marks in terms of the horror genre. But again, when we look back to Lizard in a Woman's Skin or Don't Torture a Duckling, those are also brilliant horror films that they're just very different. And I think that's kind of what makes these films special, that they are so different, not just for Fulci, but for any horror filmmaker.
Actually, one of my own questions was related to that. So I'll go ahead and jump to mine, and then we'll go back to the shy attendee. So I'm curious, we talked last week about how Zombie was Fulci's major horror breakthrough. That, he'd been a filmmaker for 10 plus years prior to that, but Zombie was the film that put him in the direction of horror. Do you see City of the Living Dead, is it an advancing of his style? Like, is he refining his horror chops, or is it more that like he found his groove and he continues to work in it? Like, is it more of the same, or is he doing like kind of more interesting things?
Oh, I think he's definitely experimenting a lot more with City of the Living Dead than he is in Zombie. Zombie, I mean, Zombie is it's a fairly linear story, and there isn't a lot of when Sachetti, the screenwriter, and he kind of teamed up on this, the idea was that we are going to have a horror moment for every reel. And so, like every 9 to 10 minutes, they wanted to have a horror moment. And they weren't worrying so much about it making sense. That was kind of Sachetti's thing. He's like, it doesn't have to make sense. It can be, and I think that kind of, it threw Lucio Fulci for a loop at first, but then he kind of went, okay, well, that means we can get away with this. I mean, I love the fact that whoever came up with the idea of Daniela Doria throwing up her own intestines, I mean, that is just, it's a revolutionary thing, but it also really speaks to what horror is. It is that kind of awe where like, this should not be possible. This should not be happening. And Fulci goes all the way. And the same thing, and thanks to Gino De Rossi for being able to kind of bring it to life. The same thing with the tree panning of Bob. The fact that it kind of one-ups the splinter in the eye from Zombie, in that we see not just a thing coming toward him, but now it's a whirling thing, and it doesn't just go into her eye where we go, okay, that's where the effect happened. For years I was like, I have no idea how they accomplished that, because it's a brilliant effect.
And actually, I don't mean to keep doing this, but that leads me to another one of my own questions. So again, I'll come back to the anonymous attendee in just a second. Can you bring me back to the early 80s, either in Europe or here? Was there an assumption that people who saw City of the Living Dead had already seen Zombie. I'm unclear on if he's intentionally referencing the splinter in the eye scene, because the splinter in the eye, like it's kind of played up like she's going to turn away at the last minute or something, and then she doesn't. And here, both when Mary is in the coffin and then with the drill scene, it is kind of a near miss. So is he playing with your expectations or not?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I think I think yes. Like John Morgan, Giovanni Radici is looking at it, but yes, he does turn. But yeah, I mean, because we don't have a lot of eye horror in this one. Now that I think about it, it's kind of a hallmark of Fulci, and yeah, we don't actually have a lot of eye horror.
Bleeding eyes, but yeah.
That said, I love the fact that it does go completely through his head, and you see that is actually Radici. It's not a fake head. You can see when Doria is doing it, like, I mean, she did jam a lot of like actual like pig intestines in her mouth in order to be able to spew them out. And then of course you see the head, transition to the fake head when they just all start flowing out. But for the drill through the head, that was just it was a great effect. And I think to answer your question, I don't know that it was. I think he was certainly trying to one up himself. I don't know that he was necessarily worrying about the United States audience.
Fair enough. I think the best filmmakers don't worry about the United States audience. Okay, so finally, I'll come back to the person that spawned this line of questioning. Her second question, as the case may be, can you speak to how this film fits into the wider career of, and I don't know how to pronounce the director's name. It looks like Michele Soavi.
Michele Soavi.
Okay, there we go. Yeah. So how does it fit into their wider career?
To whose career? Into Michele Soavi's career?
Soavi's, yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, he was, he also kind of hung around the set. He was much more interested in being a director than an actor, but being an actor in these movies allowed him to be on set and learn from these other directors. He was an Argento protege primarily, but he worked as an AD and as an actor on a lot of other people's films. And I think there was just kind of a sense of community. Soavi seems to be somebody that you see showing up in other places. He didn't seem to kind of draw the lines that, there's that friendly or not so friendly rivalry between like Fulci and Argento and Umberto Lenzi and Ruggero Deodato. But I don't ever feel like Soavi was involved in that. But I think ultimately that's what he was hoping to do, was become a director. And once he did that, he pretty much never turned back.
Yeah, I left out the very end of that. Oh geez, I lost it. Here we go. Yeah, so the question asker specifically says that Soavi is arguably Italy's greatest unsung horror director. So I should put that.
I agree. I just encourage everybody to check out his work. I mean, Della Morte del More, aka Cemetery Man, is the one that gets a lot of the prestige, but his other films are really terrific, and he's always doing something creative and imaginative, and in some ways less kind of show-offy and more kind of organic to the storytelling than Argento.
So from Joshua Ray, we have the question: I've only seen the 5 Fulcis in April Fulcis, and every single one of them I've had to have the plot explained to me afterward. I thought that maybe it was just me, so I'm glad to hear you say that that this film was more focused on dream logic over making sense. Is this consistent across all of Fulci's work, including those films outside of horror? Would I be able to recognize him as Fulci, at least visually?
I don't. I would say the answer is no, in that the dream logic, those are almost kind of specific to these films that are kind of called the trilogy, even though I don't consider them a trilogy. I mean, the fact that they all kind of came out at the same time and they have the same leading lady, that's kind of the connective tissue. But no, I think if you go back and you look at, say, Lizard in a Woman's Skin and Don't Torture a Duckling, which I sincerely hope you do, and I hope you tune in for Troy's commentary on it. But I don't know that you would go, oh, that's a Fulci film. I think what you would do is, in the way of like Robert Aldrich, where you go, oh, this is a really good movie, and oh, wow, that was made by that guy who also did that, and it just kind of like you go, oh, this guy can do anything. And I think that's that's kind of, that's the thing that gets lost on a lot of Fulci fans who only know these films, and maybe moving forward, is that there was much more to Fulci. This was an experimental phase for him. And it turned out to be a very profitable one for him in terms of getting him noticed. And so there was a tendency to kind of return to the well after this happened. But I think that if you go back and look at his earlier stuff and his non-genre stuff, I don't know that you would recognize any of the Fulci stamps. I think what you'd recognize is, oh, this is a really genuinely, inspired filmmaker.
Alan Trump wants to know if there's any evidence that Fulci was a Lovecraft fan other than Dunwich being the name of the town that this film is set in.
He actually, my understanding is that he wasn't a huge Lovecraft fan until he started reading. He started reading Lovecraft right around the time that Zombie was being done, and so it was already in his mind, and it fed well into what Sachetti had in mind, which is kind of like creating that horror moment for every reel, because a lot of it is kind of the unspeakable horror, and so he was allowed to kind of like use that dark imagination. But I don't know that he was a lifelong Lovecraft fan. Like I say, he tended to favor like kind of standard narratives. Again, Agatha Christie was one of his favorite authors, and he liked the traditional narrative. So that's why this was as much a surprise for him as for anybody else, I think.
From Gavin Schmidt, he says that he knows that the series is April Fulci's, but he wants to put you on the spot. Who did it best, Fulci, Bava, Argento, or someone else?
Did what the best? That's my question. If you're asking my personal favorites, I mean, this movie was my first introduction to what I came to know as Italian horror. And then later I saw Suspiria. I'm going to be, to be honest, I was one of those people who didn't quite get it at first. It took several visits to the buffet to be like, okay, I'm developing a taste for this now. I can appreciate this now. I think like many people who grew up on standard Hollywood fare, we were used to having things spoon-fed to us. We were used to having, a beginning, middle, and an end. And so for Fulci to kind of go into that bold unknown, I have to give him a lot of credit. There's no denying the artistry of Dario Argento and his cinematography and his just alacrity with the camera, but also you look back at Mario Bava's, like just the innovative lighting, where you're just like, I've never seen anything like this before. I mean, I think all of them were pioneers, and I think they pushed each other. They inspired each other to try and do something different, to make a name for themselves and not let that damn Dario take all the credit. That may have been more Romanian than Italian, so my apologies.
So Aaron Abishan, our speaker in 2 weeks, he says, horror fans sometimes disparage Fulci for eschewing logic in this and in the beyond, especially, but American films like A Nightmare on Elm Street do it too, yet nobody yells at Wes Craven for Blood Geysers defying gravity. Why do you think this is?
Why do I think this is? I don't know, other than the fact that they were, I think part of it, and I do think I have an idea. I think there's a more polished quality to Nightmare on Elm Street. City of the Living Dead, The Beyond, they have kind of just an off quality to them. They don't feel like a Hollywood movie. Nightmare on Elm Street feels like, an American-made film with attractive people speaking in American accents, and there isn't that weird dub disconnect. I think that's part of the accessibility. I think the other thing is that Nightmare on Elm Street, while it dabbles in that surrealism, it doesn't wallow in it the way that Gates of Hell and The Beyond do. And so it's easier to be like, kind of how I was listing all the WTF moments in City of the Living Dead. There's a couple of them in Nightmare on Elm Street. It's not this avalanche that just kind of like explodes your brain. And I think that's part of it. I think it's nice that, like maybe something like Nightmare on Elm Street and like John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness might help an American film fan prepare themselves for Italian horror. Be like, okay, I'm just getting that plus some.
We have a question from Jessica. She says that both with Zombie and City of the Living Dead, there seems to be a trend where at crucial moments, a main character has to face off with a loved one who now poses as a murderous threat. Is this something Fulci continues to do in other works, and why do you think he does this? I think it's so compelling to force a character into a situation where they either have to choose either killing someone they care about or letting themselves be killed. And also, you did a wonderful job.
Well, thank you. And I think you kind of answered your own question, which is there's a lot of dramatic heft to it. We see it a lot. I mean, we've seen it in vampire movies. We've seen it in werewolf movies. We've seen it in zombie movies. The idea of putting, the only one who can uh, rid them of the curse is a loved one. And I think that's, like we see that time and time again because there's an emotional heft to it. I think, I would hope it's common knowledge that horror works best when the human element is present, when there's an emotional attachment to the characters and they're not just cannon fodder. I can't say that we get a lot of emotional attachment to these characters. I will say though that I find I found myself genuinely surprised the first time I saw it that Christopher George, who's our ostensible hero, dies like 10 minutes before the movie's over. I was like, what? Wait a minute. It was not quite psycho, but it was certainly, I was like, I did not expect that. Nice job. But I think that's the answer is that we're going to get the most emotional bang for our buck by putting two loved ones in opposition with one another. And we can see that, one of them still really cares, but the other one is no longer who they once were.
So Charles Jacobson says, is the horror genre supposed to transport us to the satanic world or rituals? Is that the origin or inspiration of the horror genre?
Wait, say that again.
Is the horror genre supposed to transport us to the satanic world or rituals? Is that the origin or inspiration of the horror genre? Charles is a regular of ours. He doesn't have an agenda. Don't worry.
Oh no, I'm just like, I think that I don't know that I think that that's the intention of the horror genre. My idea, and I mean, I love the idea of it. I mean, I love that there's, some conspiracy theory going on. I like that. But I think it's more just, it follows that Greek idea of the catharsis. It's the ability to kind of encounter death and fear in a safe environment, to experience the roller coaster of emotions and do it from a place of safety. I think that's kind of the big thing of the horror genre. And also just that there's kind of a dare factor of a having run the gauntlet and survived. Like putting ourselves in that line of fire of like, okay, I'm going to try to, be really scared here. And I am, and I came out the other side. I've been watching horror for almost 50 years now. And, I am still looking for that movie that does give me that frisson, like that, oh gosh, I'm genuinely unnerved right now. I'm sitting here in the dark and I feel things aren't quite right. And it's like, that's why we keep showing up, is to appreciate it, and even if we don't get that actual fear, what we do get is that sense of appreciation of that was really good. That really pushed some buttons. Well done.
So I have another question of my own. I maybe should attribute it to someone else. If I thought 2 seconds ahead, I would have said this was another anonymous attendee. But no, so when Bob is introduced, he's introduced with the blow-up doll. He has a blow-up doll that he's particularly interested in. But I wonder what or when you have a blow-up doll in the context of a movie about the living dead, what is the blow-up doll then? Is it more Living Dead? Is it symbolic of something else? Is it social commentary? Is there deeper meaning to our blow-up doll?
I like that it could be social commentary. I think part of it, I mean, I just love the fact that it's kind of a life raft that is like, I'm like, I don't think that's, but I don't know. I don't know, just for the record. But my feeling is that it's setting Bob up as somebody who's a loner, that he doesn't have actual human companionship, that this is the closest he's going to get to having a girlfriend. And it also, like there's also that kind of raincoat crowd, where we're like, oh, he has sex with a sex doll. He must be some kind of deviant. which is the mindset that the entire town has of him, that he is, he's an outsider. And I think, there's a part of me that goes, there's nothing wrong with him having a sex doll. And, in some ways it's kind of, it makes him a tragic figure that he doesn't have a human connection. What's interesting is like, then Emily shows up as though they're pals. She comes right over to his little shack or whatever. And then, he throws her aside. But yeah, no, I don't know that it's any kind of social commentary. But I do like the fact that it's a little weird touch that we have thrown in that does inform us about the character, should we choose to engage with the character.
We're starting to run out of time, so I'll throw out a last call for questions. I do still have 3 or so more, but yeah, if you have any questions you haven't typed in yet, now is your last chance to do it. So for now, Alan Trump wants to know, as I recall, the original video release of Gates of Hell had the drill through the head scene removed. After all the other horrendous stuff this film includes, do you have any backstory on why the video distributors chopped that one scene out?
Oh boy. I mean, no. I mean, I don't have, that's the short answer. I don't know. My thought was that, I mean, I know there were certain cuts made to it. I mean, the obvious reason is it's probably, one of the, if you're going to cut something, you've got the three, you got the maggots, you've got the vomiting in the intestines, and you've got the drill through the head. And it's kind of like, well, the drill through the head seems to be, it's the first time and the only time in the movie where a person is killed by another living person. It's not a zombie. It's like it's a human being killing another human being. And I think perhaps that gave it a little more zing, and that made people a little more nervous with it. Again, I speak to the effectiveness of the effect. We can see the lines for the intestine vomit. We don't necessarily see the lines for the drill bit.
I think you're right.
I did that.
I think I just stepped on what you said. I'm sorry. What was the last thing you said?
I said the drill bit. Get it?
That deserved to be stepped on.
Please step on everything from now
on. No, I don't know, you brought up the vomiting intestine scene so much. I feel like I should go on the record saying that's one of the things that sold me on Fulci. I really like the vomiting intestine scene. And it's something about, there's a lot of charm to where like they cut to like clearly the uncomfortable actors with like the animal intestine, but then they've got the like Jan Smockmeyer head that's like really gushes them out. I like that a lot. I can't speak, this doesn't exactly answer the last question, but I did read that the drill to the head scene was cut out to meet certification standards in the UK specifically. So that's probably where the cut originated, but I don't know why. I think your answer to that was very good. But yeah, that's maybe where it started at least.
Well, and I don't know if Alan saw because I mean, I think he was talking about the US release.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I recall seeing the drill scene when I watched it, which is why I was like, oh, was that cut out? But I've also seen it like 20 times, so I can't really remember the first time with absolute clarity.
So I've mostly been ignoring nice comments that I hope that you've seen, but a number of people have said things along the lines of bravo and AC, not that I doubted you, but you're effing killing it, things like that. I've got a couple of last quick questions since it's 7:59. One I've been ignoring this whole time, not too deliberately, is someone named NC says, I'm curious to know if Aaron uses some special conditioner on his beard or if it's just naturally luxurious.
Well, I thank you. And no, this is just my natural grease.
And then Michelle Trudell wants to know if you have a favorite squishy food to eat while watching Italian horror.
Oh, wow. That's a great one. A favorite squishy food?
Yeah, you can eat popcorn.
What? Yeah, I was gonna say, like anything like rice is really good during the maggot scene. And then I think, like anything that's got some nice heft and texture to it during the intestine scene. I think that is a great idea for the next dinner party we host, to have a City of the Living Dead themed banquet, and we come out with our 9 courses.
Yeah. Haggis and blood sausage. And
yeah, I mean, it just kind of writes itself, really.
All right, well, we're at 8 o'clock and we're talking about what squishy foods we would eat. So maybe this is a good time to wrap up. Thank you so much to everyone for coming. I hope you come back next week for Andy Treichenbach on the Beyond and come back to all of the rest of the April Fulcis events. And thank you, Dr. AC. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure for me. I'm looking forward to the rest of the month.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody, I'll see you next week. Thanks again.
Bye now.